Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's special program, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, His Life and Legacy. My name is Melissa Shore, and I'm a volunteer with 3GNY. I'd like to share some information about myself and how I connected with tonight's speaker, as well as tell you the role of 3GNY and what it plays in the Holocaust survivor community. I am a 3G. My mother's parents were Holocaust survivors from Poland. Like many survivors, my grandparents found themselves in a DP camp shortly after being liberated. The camp was in Germany and what had formerly been a training camp for Hitler's elite youth. It was here that my mother was born in September of 1946, and at some point thereafter, my family immigrated to Montreal, Canada, and 12 years later came to the United States. I knew very little about their life before the war, their journey to Germany, and their immigration to Canada. As in many families of Holocaust survivors, these events were never spoken about. So it was up to me to put the puzzle pieces together. In 2023, I began researching my family's roots, and little did I know what an amazing journey it would be and how much incredible information I would find. During my research, I discovered incredible communities like the 3G community, which provided research resources and a window into stories of survival I had not previously been aware of. When I heard about Aristides de Sousa Mendes' act of heroism and extraordinary rescue operation, I knew I had to learn more. It was in reaching out to the Sousa Mendes Foundation that I met Dr. Mattis, tonight's speaker. But before telling you more about her, I'd like to share a little bit about 3GNY. 3GNY is an educational nonprofit for grandchildren of Holocaust survivors and supporters. As a living link, we preserve the legacies and lessons of the Holocaust. Our mission is to educate diverse communities about the perils of intolerance and to provide a supportive forum for the descendants of survivors. We empower 3Gs to share their stories. 3GNY's flagship educational initiative, We Do, which is short for We Educate, empowers grandchildren of survivors to compellingly share their families' Holocaust experiences in school classrooms and with community groups. Through our grandparents' stories, we provide a human face to the past and a living link to the present, inspiring our listeners to stand up to hatred and to act with courage and compassion, something the world desperately needs more of today. Since 2005, 3GNY has trained more than 500 speakers in the New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, and other areas around the country. We've shared our stories in more than 1,500 classrooms. We've impacted more than 60,000 students and community members. And between our live programming and YouTube channel, more than 18,000 additional people have heard our stories. So hope is not lost, and we need to keep doing this work now more than ever. You can help us accomplish this through a financial gift. This will go directly towards engaging more speakers and more schools, thus reaching even more students with these impactful stories. We do not solicit donations from schools, teachers, or students. We provide our programming to schools completely free to remove any barriers from connecting students with moving personal testimony from the Holocaust. Similarly, we provide community programs like tonight's conversation to help us find meaning and connection through our shared history and identity. We are grateful for your donations to support our work for programs like this one. There is a link with ways to donate in the chat, and we hope you'll consider making a gift. And if you've contributed before, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. It is because of donors like you that we can continue to educate students in the community about the lessons of the Holocaust through our family's personal stories. I now like to formally introduce Dr. Olivia Mattis. Dr. Olivia Mattis is an award-winning author with a PhD from Stanford University and a BA from Yale University. 12 members of her paternal family were rescued by Aristides de Sousa Mendes as they escaped from Belgium in 1940. Meanwhile, her maternal grandparents founded and led the Jewish resistance there, while her mother was a hidden child. Mattis lectures widely and delivered keynote addresses at the 2011 Yom HaShoah commemoration of the city of Philadelphia and the 2014 Yom HaShoah commemoration of the city of Rochester. She has organized high-profile international conferences, exhibitions, and special events that have received media coverage from Good Morning America and the New York Times. She is a contributing editor of the Jewish Genealogy and Family History Journal Avotenu Online and author of Sousa Mendes lists The Search for Survivors. Throughout tonight's presentation and discussion, we encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A feature in your Zoom menu. And after tonight's film screening, we will try to get to as many questions as we can. So without any further ado, I'm honored to introduce you to Dr. Olivia Mattis, President and CEO of the Sousa Mendes Foundation. Take it away, Olivia.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to speak to all of you tonight. So the way it's going to work is I'm going to give a little bit of a presentation about who was our hero, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, and what we do at the Sousa Mendes Foundation. Then my talk will be about 15 minutes or so. Then I'm going to introduce the film that we're going to see. Then we're going to watch the film together. It's about 30 minutes. Then when the film comes down, I will be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. And if we don't get to all the questions, I'm happy to answer questions later via email at info@sousamendesfoundation.org. And I look forward to your questions. So again, my name is Olivia Mattis, and 15 years ago, a group of us founded the Sousa Mendes Foundation. My own father was saved by this hero. Behind me, you see a street sign that we inaugurated in Jerusalem in 2022. And on the other side of me, you see a poster for a film, not the one that we're seeing tonight, but a different film. This is like a feature film with actors. What we're seeing tonight is a documentary. And this film, Disobedience Behind Me, is another one that we represent. So let me start by telling you who was Aristides de Sousa Mendes. And you're going to now see some pictures. So this is our hero coming up on the screen right now. Aristides de Sousa Mendes, he was recognized by Yad Vashem as a righteous among the nations in 1966, one of the very first to be so honored. He was the Portuguese consul general stationed in Bordeaux, France. So he was Portuguese, and he was stationed in France between those years, 1938 and 1940. And what did he do? He saved lives. He rescued Jews in 1939 and 1940, with his main action being between the dates of June 12th and June 23, 1940. He defied his government to save these lives, and he was harshly punished. He died in poverty and disgrace in 1954, and he's only been recognized posthumously. So who did he save? Well, look, Hans and Margaret Ray, these were German Jews saved by him on June 20th, 1940. Maybe you know who they are. They wrote the Curious George books, and they escaped from France with the manuscript to the first Curious George book in their suitcase. So literally, there would be no Curious George without our hero, Aristides de Sousa Mendes. So who else did he save? Well, first, the Rays traveled to New York with that manuscript, just as I said. And there he is. So he also saved the famous artist Salvador Dali and his wife Gala, who was Russian-born, and the edict that Sousa Mendes defied also prevented him from giving visas to Russians. So he had to defy that edict to save the Dali couple, and they received their visas on that same date, June 20th, 1940. Now, why was Salvador Dali in danger? So they crossed into Portugal and they ultimately sailed to New York in 1940. He was in danger because his art had been included in the famous Nazi art exhibition in Munich in 1937 called Entartete Kunst, Degenerate Art. And so he was on, the Nazi enemy list. When Dali arrived in New York, that was one of the catalysts in the development of New York City as a world art center in the post-war years. So if you like to go to art galleries and art museums in New York, you can partly thank this visa given to Salvador Dali by Aristides de Sousa Mendes. Here's an example of a painting that Dali made during his escape called The Face of War. And now you see a picture of my father as he looked before he left Belgium with his little Belgian hat and his little Belgian getup. This is my father, Daniel Mattis, who is now 92 years old, thanks to this visa that he received on May 31st, 1940 by Aristides de Sousa Mendes when he was 7 years old. The consul and the rabbi. Here is Sousa Mendes on your right. On the left, we see Rabbi Chaim Kruger. Who was he? He was a Polish refugee living in Belgium. He and his family had been living in Belgium and they escaped. He had a wife and 5 children. He was sort of the catalyst for the Sousa Mendes action. Sousa Mendes, they befriended each other, and Sousa Mendes offered him a visa as an act of friendship. He says, I will defy my government and help you. And what Rabbi Kruger did that was so brave was to say, you can't just help me. You have to save all of my brothers and sisters, which means all of the Jewish refugees waiting downstairs. And Sousa Mendes replied, I will save them all. So where do they go? Here is the map of the exodus of these visa recipients. So again, we're talking about May, June 1940. So if you look at, if we can zoom in on the map of Germany there, you see those black lines are the advance of the German army to Norway, to Denmark, to the Netherlands, to Poland, Czechoslovakia, Austria, France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Netherlands. So you see Germany as like an octopus expanding and conquering in every direction. Meanwhile, you have the frightened refugees who were taking to the roads of France, and that's the dark orange line. So they were going south in what's now remembered as the Exodus, or in France, l'Exode, much like the biblical Exodus. So in June of 1940, the New York Times reported that there were 6 to 10 million people on the roads of France traveling south. And at that point, it was the largest migration in human history. And my family was in that migration, maybe some of yours as well. So where were they trying to go? Well, that's a good question, because on one side of France, you have fascist Spain under Franco. That's if you go to the west. If you try to go to the east, you have fascist Italy under Mussolini. So the refugees didn't really know where they were going. They just knew that the Nazis were behind them and they had to keep on going. So what happened? The miracle occurred, and that is that Sousa Mendes was in that city of Bordeaux, which you see right there. Again, he was the Portuguese consul general, and his ability, even though it required his defiance of his government, his ability was to give a visa, to use his pen and give a visa, a stamp and a signature in a passport to allow people to get to Portugal. And why Portugal? Because Portugal is on the obviously west coast of Europe. And from there, these visa recipients could come to the United States, to the UK, to South America, to Africa and Asia. So they were all trying to get to Portugal. Sousa Mendes had to say no to his government to make it possible to save thousands of lives. But what about him? Did he have a happy ending? Not so much. Here is Aristides de Sousa Mendes towards the end of his life. By then, he'd suffered a stroke. His government put him on trial and punished him, demoted him, rendered him penniless. He and his family, at the end of their life, even though he was an aristocrat from this noble, grand family, living in a grand mansion, they were reduced to poverty and to taking their meals at the soup kitchen of the Jewish community of Lisbon. And the next slide, we're going to see what became of that mansion. It descended into a state of utter ruin. This is how the house looked when I first saw it in 2013. So now I want to tell you a little bit about what we do. So the Sousa Mendes Foundation was founded in 2010 by a group of us. And so we do all kinds of things. So one of our activities is, well, we were very involved in the creation of this glorious museum. This is that very same house you just saw. And here it is today as a museum that's open to the public. It was inaugurated last year in July of 2024, and it is well worth your time to visit. It was named by the New York Times in its list of 52 places to visit in 2025. What a difference from the image you saw earlier of that same house in ruins. Where is it? It is in a little village in the center of the country. So if you're familiar with Portugal, it's a vertical country. So towards the south is the capital of Lisbon. Towards the north is the second city, which is Porto. Between them is the university town of Coimbra. And not far from there is the Aristides de Sousa Mendes Museum in a town called Cabanas de Viriato. So, in addition to supporting this museum, what do? Well, we have these wonderful Sunday programs, and I encourage all of you to sign up. We hold film and discussion programs on all kinds of stories of rescue, resistance, and hope. We present filmmakers, historians, authors, survivors on any number of subjects. If you go to our YouTube channel, you will see about 200 programs we have done so far on just a multiplicity of subjects. We interview survivors. We have professional filmmakers that we work with to create professional quality interviews with these survivors. We also collect testimonials and artifacts. So we have an archive. I'm here on Long Island in Huntington. We have an artifact of original passports with visas and other types of artifacts. We receive researchers by appointment. That's filmmakers, students, people writing books, etc. What else do? We have publications. This is our graphic novel currently out of print. We are reprinting it. It's called Aristides de Sousa Mendes, Hero of the Holocaust, and it's absolutely delightful. It was drawn by the most famous cartoonist in Portugal, and what we did was we created an edition in English. We also participate in exhibitions all over the world. What you're looking at here is a shot of an exhibition we were involved in the country of Luxembourg right before the pandemic. And then currently we're involved in an exhibition in the Sousa Mendes Museum. This is the Curious George room we have created in the museum, telling the story of the journey that saved Curious George. We also have a trip that we organize through France, Spain, and Portugal, retracing the footsteps of Sousa Mendes and the refugees of 1940. It's called Journey on the Road to Freedom. This year, we're doing a similar trip, not exactly this one. It's an Educators Institute. So it's for teachers only, and it's Portugal only, and that's starting in about 2 weeks. So if you're interested in either type of trip, please reach out to us. We also have these terrific playing cards that you see on your screen, Heroes of the Holocaust Rescuer playing cards, giving 52 inspiring rescue stories of Muslims, Christians, and Jews who saved Jews from 25 countries. There's also a full-length essay in the box about rescuers of Jews during the Holocaust, and we like to talk about it as an education in a box. And there at the bottom is the link where you can get your own deck of cards. And here are some of the heroes featured inside of the deck. We have Irena Sendler, who is our Queen of Hearts, Varian Fry, our King of Spades. Of course, our hero, Aristides de Sousa Mendes, is the Ace of Hearts. What else? We have Oskar Schindler, and we have Hannah Senesh, and many, many other stories for you to either be reminded of or to discover for the first time. They make wonderful gifts, and so that's that. The next slide is simply our contact information. There is our website. There is our email address, info@sousamendesfoundation.org. You can just take a screenshot of this. You can call us at that number, follow us on social media. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have YouTube, and we hope that you will engage with us any way that is comfortable for you. So now, well, first of all, let me hold up the deck of cards so you see it. And so that's it. So I hope it interests you. Now I'm going to tell you about the film we're going to watch together. So, this is a film that was made by a television crew from Berlin, Germany. So, the film is actually in German with English subtitles. It's called Saved by Sousa Mendes. And basically, we had this film crew that followed us along on the last time that we did one of these journeys. So you're going to see what it's like on the journey. You're going to meet some of the families that took the trip, find out how it changed their lives. And then when we're done with the film, I will be back on screen to answer your questions. So now I think we're ready to roll the film. Okay, so that's the film, and now I'm more than happy to answer any of your questions.
So let me just say that was incredibly moving. I had tears in my eyes, so thank you so much, Olivia. I'm going to kick it off with a couple of questions, if that's okay. I was curious how you came to find out that your family was saved by this gentleman and how you connected with his family members.
So my grandmother was a storyteller. She lived to be almost 100. I was very close to her. She wrote a book, she wrote her memoirs. She wrote them in French. She lived in Switzerland, in Geneva, Switzerland. And at a certain point, my father asked me to translate her book into English. And at the time I was in college, it was sort of what I was doing for a summer job for extra money. My heart wasn't really in it, but that is the first time that I sort of came across again my grandmother's stories, but in written form, having to translate them. She does not mention his name. She tells the story, but without mentioning his name. She did not know his name. So I knew we were helped by some Portuguese man. I was a little sketchy on the details. She got some of the facts wrong. Doesn't really matter, but that was my introduction to the story was that. Then years later, my father was flipping channels on the TV. He and my mother, who both are French speaking, even though they've been in this country for, a lot of years. They get French TV among their many channels, and he was flipping channels, and he comes across a movie that he realizes is about the man who saved his life, and he presses record. And so that movie was this movie that we now represent. And so shortly after that, everything just sort of crashed into my life, and the foundation was born.
Wow, incredible. I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section, or the chat is fine as well. I was curious how your father and your mother, but I guess your father's family was saved. How does your father feel about the work you're doing today?
Here's the thing. My father, he was 7, right? So he was old enough to have memories, but sort of a little too young to fully understand what was going on. He also was suffering at that time in 1940 from appendicitis. So he was in physical pain during this exodus that you saw, and absolutely never wanted to speak about it, because if I'm asking him to remember, I'm asking him to then remember things he really would rather forget. So part of my own motivation was to interview all these other people who had the same story as my family, so that I could finally figure out what it was that he went through. I mean, we've spoken about it since, but it took many years.
So, how many do you know at this point? How many people you've met that have been saved by this amazing movement?
This man, Sousa Mendes. Um,
Yeah,
so, obviously we're at the level of people who were children and even young children. We're now 85 years later, right?
yeah,
And the foundation was started 15 years ago, where we were 70 years later. So we were still, I did meet a few people who were adults during that time period after starting the foundation, but mostly you're talking about children and teenagers and so forth,
yeah.
and then their families. So I've met many, many descendants. So we like to take, big, beautiful group pictures when we have a public event. Like we had a big event at the United Nations. We would have had a big event at the Center for Jewish History in New York. And, just hundreds of people came, and we took these big group pictures. So I've met a lot. And then, of course, his own family, that was really key for me because, I knew more or less our own family's happy story, happy ending. They actually didn't come straight to the US, which was hard to do in those days. They went first to Brazil and then eventually to the US. Whatever, I knew those details more or less. But I had no clue about how much this man and his family, his whole family suffered so that
Yeah.
my own family and families like mine could live. And when I came to that realization after meeting these grandchildren of Sousa Mendes and now the great grandchildren, that was a showstopper for me. I had to stop what I was doing, and then this really became central to everything.
Wow. Yeah, someone just put in the chat that they're a docent at the Holocaust Museum in Houston, and there's a tiny section about Mendez, and they've always had this included a story in their tour, so amazing. And their exhibit says that he saved about 10,000 people, but they're wondering if that number isn't exactly accurate.
Numbers are always problematic for any Holocaust story. I would urge everybody to be aware of numbers. The number that's typically bandied about for the Sousa Mendes action is 30,000. I am a historian by training, history of music. I'm a musicologist, but I'm interested in documenting things and in really having everything be nice and solid. So we've had this incredible research effort to document the families and find the families. So if you look on our website, you will see all these families that we've been able to identify. We've been able to identify so far about 4,000 individual visa recipients by name. On top of that, there are probably thousands more that have not yet been identified by name, but we know that there were crowds of such and such a size, or different documents that mention, numbers. We know that the Sousa Mendes visa recipients, for the most part, crossed into Portugal at the end of June 1940 or beginning of July 1940. So we look at who, those records. And then, of course, ship immigration records, which are beautiful. Those are all on Ancestry. All of the ships that came to the United States. What's really beautiful about them is that they mention each individual down to the newborn baby. So if we
Wow.
so we do have a visa registry book that survives, that's incomplete, and that's one of two books that was kept in Bordeaux. There was also the action in Bayonne. There was no book for that, and there were actions in other cities connected to Sousa Mendes, Toulouse, Honda, no documentation for that. But so in this Bordeaux book, we're able to see we're able to see names of refugees, handwritten, so we have to decipher them. And it's names of passport holders only because in those days, children did not generally have their own passports. They would be written into their mother's or their father's passport. So, for example, in my own family, there are 5 names of my family members in that visa registry book, but there were 12 altogether. So my father, who was 7, was between the lines.
Mm.
So with the passenger list, there he is. We can see, oh, the family group was this number of people and these are their names. So that's the thrill of research, the thrill of discovery, and that's how we've been able to build it out and get to 4,000 names, which is really quite a feat.
So if somebody's curious, if they were saved by Sousa Mendes, is there a way for them to figure that out? Would you be able to help them?
100%. And we have
Okay.
people coming to us all the time with that question. And I recently gave a talk at the Holocaust Museum in Glen Cove, Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, wonderful museum. I talked to their docents, their tour guides, and showed the film we just saw.
Mhm.
And in the Q&A, one of the people in the audience says, I'm awfully curious about this whole story. I know I was born in Paris. I was 2 years old when we came to America. I know we went through Portugal. Is there some chance I'm connected? And luckily, she had her parents' passports. I was able to confirm with her that yes, she herself was personally saved. And here she is now, born 1938. So she's, 87 years old, discovering that she was saved by this man.
Incredible. Wow. A question came in through the Q&A. It says, how were the refugees able to get through Spain, even with the Portuguese visas, because Spain was fascist? And why did the Portuguese allow tens of thousands of refugees in the country when they put Sousa Mendes essentially on trial for what he did?
Those are both great questions. They're two different questions, so I'm going to tackle them one at a time. So, first of all, let's go back to the fact that this is a story that takes place in France. It's a French story. So, these are refugees who are, if you will, trapped in France trying to get out. So, in those days, in order to leave France, one needed a minimum of 3 visas. 3 visas. You needed a destination visa of some country that you were going to. That was hard to get, like a visa to the US, like impossible to get. Then once you had the destination visa, you had to get transit visas through all the intermediate countries, including Spain. And once you had all of those visas in place, you would then go to the French authorities and request your French exit visa. So it was like almost impossible to get out. It was like you needed multiple miracles, of which Sousa Mendes was only one miracle, necessary but not sufficient. So the answer is that Sousa Mendes sort of gave these visas as if they were destination visas. That's part of why he didn't have the right to do it. He would give these visas whether or not you had a ship or a destination beyond Portugal. He would just give you the visa. So once you had that, you'd show it to Spain, and they would give you the visa through Spain to get to Portugal, and then you could get your French exit visa, unless you were a male of military age, because under the terms of the capitulation of France to Germany on June 22nd, 1940, military-aged men were not allowed out. So one of the tragedies that we found in doing this research was we would identify all the members of the family, but suddenly we would see all but the father on the ship, or all but the eldest son or whatever. So where's daddy or whatever? So once we were able to find a lot of these families, we then were able to ask them, and we discovered all kinds of answers to that question. Families that chose to, go on without that man of the family, and then he either went into hiding or paid a smuggler or found some other way out, or families that chose to stay together and all went into hiding. Some of those survived, some were deported. So what we do is we want to document every single family, no matter what their fate, which is so interesting, so complex. And to answer the other part of the question, which was, Portugal. Okay, so yes, Portugal was neutral, and it was under the dictator Salazar. Portugal was one of 5 neutral countries during World War II. We now know that none of those 5 were actually neutral. Portugal is one of 2 countries, the other being Switzerland, that was wealthier after World War II than before World War II. They had all of this Nazi gold, actually, that to this day is in the Bank of Portugal, most of it, seized from Holocaust victims and paid in exchange for the Portuguese supplying the Nazis with tungsten and leather for their boots and sardines and whatever else they supplied. So Portugal was playing this delicate dance of neutrality. They also had a multi-hundreds year treaty with England. So they were walking this tightrope. What Sousa Mendes did was he disrupted that calculation, and the dictator never forgave him. But in terms of the dictator letting these people in, um, um, that was a problem. I mean, they showed up, there they were. So the question is how to manage them and how to get them out as quickly as possible, and that's what happened.
Wow. I know we're a little over time, but I have one more question that came in. The question is, did Sousa Mendes ever see his friend the rabbi again?
Yes, they met again in Lisbon. And Sousa Mendes told Rabbi Kruger that he had no regrets about what he did, even though he was punished, and he would do it all again. And he said, if one Catholic can suffer for so many Jews, excuse me, let's start again, that if so many Jews could suffer because of the actions of one Catholic, meaning Hitler, who was a baptized Catholic, never excommunicated, let that sink in. So if all these Jews could suffer for one Catholic, then one Catholic, meaning himself, Sousa Mendes, could suffer for all of these Jews. And he said, I could not have acted otherwise.
Well, I think that's a beautiful way to wrap this up. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. If there's any additional questions, feel free to reach out to Olivia directly and the foundation. We're going to be sending out a recording of this program in the coming week. We'd love to hear your feedback to help improve our programming. So in the chat, you're going to see a link to a brief survey. But a really, really, really big thank you to Dr. Mattis and to Sousa Mendes. What a wonderful evening to spend together. Thank you to everybody joining, and looking forward to seeing you at future webinars. Thank you again. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.